The Peace Corps is really the idea of the American people. When I talked last fall about the idea of young American men and women going abroad to serve shoulder to shoulder with the citizens of newly emerging countries, a tremendous response went up from the schools and colleges of the United States. In the last few months, more applications for the Peace Corps have come to us than have come for positions in all the rest of the United States government put together. What is remarkable is that there is no salary for the members of the Peace Corps. They will go abroad and live on the same standard as people of other countries, that they will work with them 2 or 3 years, devoting part of their lives to peace and to strengthening the ties that bind men together all over the globe. Members of the Peace Corps will work first as teachers, secondly as agriculturalists, in order to improve agricultural production in the countries to which they're accredited. I hope that from it will come renewed understanding by people all over the world of a common desire for peace. I hope out of it will come a better life for all mankind.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Michael Adams, and I'm president of the Nebraska World Affairs Council. I'm happy to welcome you to today's webinar, Building Back Better, an update of today's Peace Corps, where we've come and where we're going. I believe you'll find it fascinating. I also welcome the speaker, Tess De Los Rios, and I'll just say a few words about our organization, the Nebraska World Affairs Council, which we affectionately call NUAC, and then I'll hand it off to Julie, who will introduce the speaker. And as Julie mentioned, both she and I and Tess and one of the other attendees are all former Peace Corps volunteers. So we'll be fascinated to see how things are doing. There'll be time for questions and answers following the presentation. And if you have any questions, please post them in the chat room. And Julie will moderate that Q&A activity. The presentation is being recorded, and we will post it in the next couple of days on the NUAC YouTube channel for all those people who weren't able to attend. The Nebraska World Affairs Council's roots go back 50 years to 1972. In fact, this is our 50th anniversary year. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit membership organization, and our mission is to provide educational programming as well as engagement opportunities together with many of our partners for our 3 targeted sectors that we focus on: students, young professionals, and community leaders, with the goal that they can become competent and informed global citizens in this very complex, interconnected world that we all live in. We definitely encourage citizen-to-citizen diplomacy as a way to promote peace and mutual respect so that all of us can thrive. And I invite all of you to follow us on our digital media sites, Facebook, Instagram, and our website as well. And global citizens are needed here, so please consider joining us. Thank you very much, and I'm really looking forward to this. And I'll hand it off to Julie now to introduce our speaker.
Great. Thanks, Michael, for that introduction. So I will start with just saying that Tess is a Nebraska native. She's from Ogallala. So if you didn't know that, yes, but has been doing international work in international development and international education for a number of years now. She is an RPCV from Panama and was working in Panama as early as 2007 in the Peace Corps Response Program as the program director. And then later, after a number of years in Panama in 2016, then transferred to the Dominican Republic and was working as the deputy director of programming training, and is now the director of programming and training. So thank you, Tess, for joining us and for just facilitating this discussion about the Peace Corps and how it's been evolving over the last couple of years. So yeah, without further ado, take it away.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Julie. I really appreciate the opportunity today. Thank you, Michael, as well. Just to share this unique space that Nebraska World Affairs Council has created. I watched a few of the other previous presentations, and so it's really my pleasure to be with you all today. Over the next half hour or so, I'm going to share how I began with Peace Corps, some of my personal experiences, maybe a few too many photos, and then how the agency is building back better after the evacuation of all volunteers back in March of 2020. So, and like I said, I also hope to have time for some questions. I am currently in the Dominican Republic. It's common that the electricity goes off at times. And so if I freeze or my Zoom box goes black, know that I will be back as soon as possible. As Julie mentioned, I'm gonna share my screen here and see about Nebraska. Can you guys see that screen? Just a little, I'm not sure how many people on the call are from Nebraska, but I am from Western Nebraska. Julie mentioned Ogallala, so it's not quite Ogallala, but I was thinking sometimes when people hear Western Nebraska, they think York, they think Grand Island, they think North Platte maybe. Here's Ogallala, and so really I'm from just a little further west in this little town of Broadwater, Nebraska. You're cruising to Broadwater, the population sign says 140, and that's not 140,000, as some people think when I mention it. It is just 140 individual human beings, right? And so I attended a public school there where there are 3 teachers in 3 multi-grade classrooms, 30 students about between kindergarten and 8th grade. So we're all similar in appearances. Our families are all similar backgrounds. We all spoke the same language. There was no social media, no internet to expand our minds very much, right? And so just thinking about Michael's comment of how to become a global citizen, like where does that come from? Where does one's interest begin, right? For me, it was my 4-H leaders exchange student. They had a girl from Costa Rica, of all places, Lori, that came. She was a 15-year-old high school student that lived with my 4-H leader, and she came to visit our 3rd grade classroom. Her name was Alejandra, and I can remember it so clearly. She sang the popular Richie Valens song at the time. It was La Bamba, and she sang it in Spanish first, and then in English, and I was just like, oh my goodness, she speaks 2 languages, and she's 15 years old. This is amazing. And at the time, I had no idea where Costa Rica even was at, right? But I did know that I wanted to learn Spanish then, that was the opportunity that I wanted to take to learn more, right? So finish grade school, then go to high school, a little bit bigger town, and we did have the opportunity then to start learning Spanish as a sophomore in high school. From there, I went to Nebraska Wesleyan University and began to study or continued studying Spanish as a second language in Nebraska Wesleyan. I had the privilege of going abroad for a semester to Cordoba. Their Spanish is nothing like the Spanish I thought I knew how to speak. So learned a different Spanish there. And then also completed my major by spending 2 months in Querétaro, Mexico, living and working in the Sierra Gorda Mountains. So I had the opportunity at that time to expand my Spanish a little bit. And in between those 2 experiences, my best friend and college roommate at the time, who's from Kimball, Nebraska, she started talking about the Peace Corps and the fact that one of her uncles had done it, and he had the greatest stories. And so the more we talked about it, having been to 2 countries, I thought that I'd gone to those 2 kind of on my own. And so I thought maybe the Peace Corps would be another way to experience a country in a safe way and a smart way, right? To experience another country and improve my Spanish is what I was hoping to do. So we both applied via snail mail, which was the only way to apply for the Peace Corps back then. And before I expand on my Peace Corps service, I wanted to share a little bit about what is Peace Corps, in the event there's people on the call that aren't familiar with Peace Corps. It was created by President John F. Kennedy in 1961. He had the vision of promoting world peace and friendship by pursuing 3 goals that still remain unchanged today, 61 years later. Goal 1 was to help the peoples of interested countries in meeting their need for trained men and women. Goal 2, help promote a better understanding of Americans on the part of people served. And goal 3, to promote a better understanding of peoples on the part of Americans, of other peoples from other countries. And so we work by invitation of a host country government. We don't just go into a country and say, oh, the Peace Corps is going to work here now. We have a collaboration with the government to see where their initiatives lie, where their interests lie, and where we could complement the work they're doing. From there, we create the opportunities for Americans to work in partnership with these local communities to meet their self-identified needs. Volunteers live and work in the communities for 27 months is what the the sign up is. And so my attempt to fill goals 1 and 2 began when I received my invitation for Panama. That was in September of 2003. I'll share my screen again here. There's a few pictures of Panama. It looks very similar to Western Nebraska, if I'm not, not much, right? So there, I was an environmental health volunteer is what I was signed up to be, which was kind of latrines and water systems is what we worked most with. So it was in a rural indigenous community called Valle Risco. It was actually on the Costa Rican border, even though it was in Panama, it was the Costa Rican border with the Caribbean Sea as well. Just quite the contrast from Western Nebraska. These are photos show a typical house, it's a thatch roof, right? That they harvest from the mountainside as well. And banana plants, and then I'm carrying a bag on my back. A chakra is the typical way that the women would carry, say, the things from the farm, or during the water system construction, the men would put bags of concrete, 100-pound bags of concrete in those bags and carry them up the hill as well. So I'm probably carrying a water bottle or something and struggling up the hill, whereas these people are just incredible, their abilities. So again, I thought I'd go to Panama for 2 years and then return to Nebraska, live happily ever after. Instead, it's 2022 and I still live abroad and I still work for the Peace Corps. Who knew that living in conditions like this, without electricity, without cell phone service, no potable water, no real what we would call material comforts, right, would make me want to stay. This is an overview. These are actual photos from before we had digital cameras, right? So this is a view of our community from up on the hill. You can kind of see there's some zinc roofs as well, that those houses are easier to see. My town was bigger than my hometown. There was about 1,500 people that lived in Valle, and they were all Nobe. And so my thought of improving my Spanish kind of went out the window, because Spanish was their second language as well. They would, so they would conjugate things differently and had different accents. So it was kind of learning yet another version of Spanish, right? So my fellow volunteer and I was placed in a site with another volunteer. We spent our 2 years working with these community members, the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Environment, about the importance of latrines and water systems. This is one of the storage tanks that we built, and their water systems are very basic because they're privileged by having so much rain and the hills are literally full of water. And so all we had to do was find a spring in the side of the mountain and then create a captation box. And then it ran down by gravity into these tanks and then down into the community below. So by no means am I an engineer, and I did not design the system. We had other people do that, but it is pretty easy that way when you're just working with gravity. Peace Corps' work is distinct from other agencies and organizations in development, I believe, because it is driven by the community. For this water system, we didn't come into the community and say, hey, half of you people aren't drinking clean water. What are you going to do about it, right? We really just asked volunteers to spend those first 3 months getting to know people, get to know the community, talk to all ages, and not just people they would consider working with, but just get to know everybody as if it's your home, because that's what it becomes, right? And so this water system, the guy, Jose, who's in the yellow shirt in the middle, he actually came to my house one evening and was like, hey, I need your help. I was like, what's going on, you know? And he said, my family doesn't have running water in the house, and we keep getting sick because we're drinking the water that's coming from the river or from the stream. So I want to get a water system built, you know? And it's like, that's going to be a lot of work, Jose. But it was his initiative of saying, this is what we want to do. And so he had several other men that were on board and encouraged men and women to participate and create a new water committee that then became organized to write a grant for funds that we received part of the funding from an NGO in the States, and then part of the funding from the Ministry of Health to build this water system for these people. And it was all on them, the manual labor, et cetera. Jose ended up being our head mason. And from there, he's actually continued supporting that NGO in building and overseeing other aqueducts in our region, which has been very exciting. So we don't look for our benefit. Again, Peace Corps isn't in it to improve things for us, but it's what people in the communities want to do. And it's making that human connection right? The time we spent together, he was confident and, hey, I can go talk to her and tell her, this is what I'm thinking about. And together we figure out what else we're going to be able to do. This is my house that I lived in for those 2+ years. It was about 20 feet by 20 feet with 2 rooms of 10 by 10 and then a balcony of 10 by 20. Again, no electricity. Don't tell my safety and security manager, but the lock was just a sliding piece of wood that wouldn't fly these days. And then in the corner here, you can see an example, a slight example of one of the latrines that we built. There was a composting latrine. So here the water table is very high. It rained a lot and people were accustomed to using the river for their bathroom, right? That was just traditionally what they had done. Not that they don't have money, didn't have the money to buy toilets, etc., build concrete things, etc. So we built these compost latrines that they were able to mix with English word sawdust and ash from the fires that they cook on, dry leaves, dirt, etc., that they would mix then in to the 2 separate chambers. And then over time it would compost. It'd be 2 separate chambers so they could use one side at a time, right? And then close one side and let it turn into compost and then be able to use it in their farms. And so part of what we did was sharing with people that this could really work, because they're like, you're going to do what with what? We're not even going to get close to that latrine. But then they realized that it didn't smell bad when it's well kept and they could actually have it closer to their house. It was fun to see that behavior change over the few years. And since then we've gone back, there've been volunteers that have followed up in this community and others to do a review of that project, which the funding came from the International Development Bank that through the Ministry of Environment at the time. It was their project. And so we just solicited for our community to have those. And sorry, on the side there was the typical food that I ate all the time. Those are boiled bananas, just green boiled bananas and salt. That's what came from the farm and that's what we ate. Not a very varied diet, mind you. This is another view of the town. This is the kids in the November. There's a lot of patriotic days. And so here there's Flag Day and they're doing the school march. This is the soccer field on the left side there. And then the little buildings that they put up to have different activities. And the blue building in the back is the school. And so the school was made of concrete, had zinc roofs, but again, no electricity there either. And this is the main road that the kids are walking down. The town does now have electricity and a paved road into it, at least, because this is what the roads look like. Of the other picture there, me standing next to all the mud, is oftentimes what the road looked like because it rained so much in Bocas. My footwear was always the knee-high rubber boots or Teva sandals that were easy to wash, right? So I finished my service in 2006, and I wasn't ready to return to Nebraska and job hunt. And I was offered a local hire short-term position to facilitate a training group for incoming college focus. The Campus Ambassadors is direct outreach, and these people work closely with Peace Corps recruiters to share the different opportunities for volunteer service with the Peace Corps. And the PC Prep program is a framework that supports students to build those core competencies that will be key for them if they want to be a Peace Corps volunteer in the future. It's not an immediate that they will become a volunteer, but it offers them the experiences in building foreign language proficiency, the intercultural competence, leadership, and from there they get a certificate and then they have an edge when they do apply. And just looking online, I did see that UNL has this program, and so there's a link there, but we can share that afterwards if anybody's interested in it as well. And again, these are both just programs looking to increase our volunteer applicants now more than ever after the hiatus of the pandemic, right? People wondering, is Peace Corps coming back yet, or are they going to be working in the field again? What's that look like? A little bit about that during and post-pandemic. We're almost post-pandemic, right? If one thinks positive. All of our staff continue to be employed. Everybody went home during this time. We all thought we'd be teleworking for maybe 2 or 3 weeks when this happened. Like we evacuated all the volunteers on middle of March, almost just over 2 years ago. And that wasn't the case. It did take us 2 years to give back. Last month, we were fortunate to be one of 2 countries that brought volunteers back to the field. And it's just incredible how much time really passed. And during that time, our staff didn't quit. They made phone calls to our counterparts and the host families just to check in to see how they were doing. When we were able, we made field visits as well to check in and see how COVID had affected the communities, both in the families, both personally and professionally, right? Also trying to gauge what service would look like when we had volunteers return to country. Again, that was a global evacuation of almost 7,000 volunteers in a matter of, I want to say, 7 or 8 days. It was pretty impressive that everybody worked so hard to get everyone on their plane. And so during this time as well, headquarters created a very long list of criteria for safe re-entry to posts, everything from medical to safety and security, and even programming. And we just worked as hard as we could to check all their boxes. One of the opportunities that arose during this time was the virtual service program. It's still happening, and it's going to be an ongoing program. It's not just going to be during the pandemic. But this was created as a way for the agency to continue providing technical support to work partners in the field. These opportunities are strictly for return volunteers right now, and all work is done virtually, either through Zooms like this one, or WhatsApp calls, emails, etc. The projects run for 24 weeks, and the volunteers are collaborating with the similar counterparts that people are working with in the countries when there were volunteers in country. But now it's condensed to 10 or 15 hours a week of what we consider virtual consulting, really. Some examples are creating a field guide with youth projects, or supporting business, small businesses or schools with financial literacy, guidance for an association to build a website for local clubs, etc. Currently, there's several positions that are open with June start dates as well. So if anybody's interested in that, you can go to peacecorps.gov and look for those virtual service programs. Like I said, it's something that's going to continue through, who knows, as long as people are still interested, Peace Corps will still offer it. So we did have 2 years without volunteers, and typically at a post, volunteers come in it's cyclical when they arrive, and so we're always preparing for volunteers to come in, supporting the current volunteers that are in the field. And so this time that we weren't preparing and supporting volunteers at that all at once, it was a time for us to finally pause, take a step back and reflect on what we'd like to change and how we'd like to improve when we do have volunteers come back. And those, like I mentioned, there were Peace Corps' 3 main goals, haven't changed for the last 61 years. But during the pandemic, we have been able to create new strategic objectives under these goals. 3 of those are reimagine service, advance equity, and deliver quality. So what do these look like? Reimagine service is responding to evolving host country priorities by returning skilled volunteers to service and expanding service models. We do this by contributing to the Biden-Harris administration's COVID-19 response and recovery effort, by contributing to the host country efforts to combat climate change and its impacts, expanding and promoting the Peace Corps response program, and supporting host country national volunteer service initiatives. As far as advancing equity, they were working to build a volunteer corps and workforce that reflect the US and host country diversity, and creating inclusive and equitable systems and programs. There again, we want to integrate equity into our core business practices, taking unconscious bias trainings, post country offices having equity councils or diversity and equity inclusion committees, all part of our overarching goals now. And then delivering quality. That we're defining and delivering consistently on health, safety, and service commitments in partnership with host countries, volunteers, and staff. So there we're strengthening the systems and practices for volunteers' physical, emotional, and mental well-being, promoting collaboration, enhancing collective effectiveness, aligning our resources with agency priorities, and standardizing those business practices to reduce redundant efforts across posts. One of the greatest advances, and one that I'm most proud of during this time, has been our commitment to equity as an overarching theme, and it's really being woven into all areas of our agency through our ICDEIA strategy, which stands for Intercultural Competence, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility. Earlier this month, the agency published 3 reports highlighting our commitment to ICDEIA at every level of the organization. These are public, and afterwards you can send you guys links if you like. There's a Diversity Task Force report, the Agency Equity Action Plan, and the Agency Strategic Plan for fiscal years 2022 to 2026. As our CEO, Carol Spahn, said when presenting these reports, the Peace Corps' very mission depends on fostering a deliberate practice and culture of ICDEIA until it is inseparable from our way of connecting, doing, and being. During the pandemic, the Peace Corps received a great deal of feedback and ideas from the Peace Corps Network on how we can better serve and reflect the diversity in American society and be more inclusive for all who wish to serve. These 3 reports serve as guidance and accountability checks for the agency to follow and review as necessary. Our leadership recognized that there were numerous barriers to full and equitable participation with relation to training, support mechanisms, policies, and other resources that weren't originally designed in a way that met the needs of needs of the majority and the dominant population of staff and volunteers. But there are a lot of people who wanted to be volunteers and just weren't able to due to high costs or not knowing where to reach a recruiter, not having that privilege really to not know when your next job or when you would have a full paying job afterward, not having 2 years to give to service. And so what this looks like in practice for us under those 3 strategic objectives is the mandatory unconscious bias training for all Peace Corps staff. This is at a global level, not just US staff. It's also helping our host country national teams understand better what is racism in the States and how it looks differently at the posts. We've expanded responsibilities of the Chief Diversity Officer. Doing this, we've added staff to her office, and we're reviewing our business processes and supporting efforts to increase the diversity of the agency's workforce. We strengthened our mental health services for volunteers because being a volunteer is not easy. There's a lot of stressors. You come to a new country, there's new food, it's really hot or really cold, and you're also trying to learn a language and be understood and be professional. And it's just a lot more stress, I think, than one can ever imagine. And so here we're really doing our best to prepare volunteers for managing not only the social stressors, but also race and identity-based stress. We established a diversity dashboard, which is an analysis of attrition rates by race and ethnicity in the application process. We've expanded outreach to enhance our hiring from diverse and underrepresented communities, really reaching out to throwing our net wider, if you will, like to other universities, to new universities, different places that we haven't thought of recruiting to previously. We've engaged the Agency Equity Council, which is a group of 30 dedicated to facilitating, informing, and advancing progress on equity assessments, action planning, and other agency actions. And then we've hired a more diverse senior staff at the level of headquarters, at least, by increasing the number of members identifying as Black, Indigenous, or people of color from 6% to 38% in the last 2 years. Again, these are public and we can share a link afterwards. It just really means a lot. In the time that I've been with Peace Corps, I mean, we're always focused on the volunteer adapting and maybe being accepted. And we're really working from the other side as well to help host countries understand how volunteers are different, because previously people think, oh, the American's going to be white with blue eyes and blonde hair, and that's it, you know, and trying to really stress that that is not the norm in the US. It might be what has been previously seen on TV, etc., but we want to really allow the diverse volunteers to be a more complete face of what Peace Corps is, what is the United States. And so from there, I'll come back to the Dominican Republic and just brag a little bit if I can about PCDR. I think Julie was waiting for this moment as well, right? Just having been a volunteer here with us. As I said earlier, we were one of 2 posts who were able to receive volunteers for the first time in 2 years. And it's just about a month ago, they arrived here on March 23rd, after 2 years of nobody being here. And so Zambia was the other country who you're on the other side of the globe that was able to receive volunteers also. So we jumped through a lot of hoops and checked off a lot of boxes for criteria for people to return. And so these photos are of our 11 trainees in their first week of pre-service training, and then our 2 return volunteers who were being sworn in by the Charge d'Affaires, Robert Thomas at our embassy. This is Noah and Andrea, who were volunteers here previously. They were evacuated in 2020, and they'd only been in their sites for 4 months. And so it was just so moving and emotional to be able to take them back to those same sites on April 1st of this year. Return to the same communities, the same host families, and just really get back to work. You know, I think we've been telling people they were going to come back, and you never really believe it until you see them there. And so it was very emotional at that time. At that swearing in, there were about 30 other return volunteers who now work in the embassy that were present, and I wasn't the only one that had tears in my eyes when the swearing in ceremony was happening, because Peace Corps is just that. You know, it's all about the human connections. Taking the time to get to know each other and where people are from, what their values are, and see how you can make the world a better place together. No, we're just thrilled to be doing what we do most now, again, working side by side with the Dominican people for greater understanding and continue to attempt to reach Kennedy's initial goal of world peace and friendship, right? And with that, that ends my slides that I have for you guys today. I hope that at least one story or photo has resonated with you at whatever stage you are in your life, right? That kind of ran the gamut there of my life, just noting where that global citizenship, maybe that light came on in my head and I didn't even know what global citizenship meant at the time, but there was something that sparked my interest, and so was able to seek out other ways to continue that. No. After this, I'm sure you can write to Julie if you want my contact information for any other information or questions that you might have. But other than that, I'm available for about 10, 15 more minutes if any questions. If there's any in the chat box or.
I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but I was just curious. I know, you know, from experience to being there March of 2020, I myself had to evacuate my staff when I was working at an NGO there. And I know you also did that, and it was just a really difficult process. I'm just thinking, you know, there was a lot of, you know, feedback that you had received and posts had received about that experience. You know, you had mentioned like implementing some of their suggestions. Like, how have you seen specifically the PCDR post evolve since like that initial evacuation? I know there's a lot of uncertainty, but you know, some of their suggestions, have they been implemented?
Definitely. That again, having everybody kind of in the same space, even though everybody was at their own home, we're all in this space, right, of the Zoom. And everybody experiencing the same thing at the same time as far as the pandemic was going. I saw a heightened level of awareness and concern amongst staff, you know, that one would think that going virtual, there's going to be a disconnect, but I felt people come together even more. And we did, previously there was a diversity and inclusion group volunteers that they had created. And so we kind of complemented that. But during this time, we created our own, it's called EDI, or Equity, Diversity and Inclusion group of staff members that we would get together to have different conversations. And it was really after the murder of George Floyd, Black Lives Matters, the insurrection on January 6th, that came around and staff had questions about it. And so it was like, how do we effectively share with them more than just one perspective that they're seeing in the news right now? You know, a lot of them have family in the States as well that could have been directly affected by different events. Many Dominicans in the States would be seen as Black or people of color. And so it was helping them to understand there and give them other more information or different perspectives, like I said, that help them better understand, I guess, what was going on in the States, and then what our volunteers will come back with as well.
Great, thank you. I was really excited to see all of the equity initiatives going on, both in the DR, but also, you know, at Peace Corps as a whole.
Globally, yes, it's been amazing because there was a different administration where we couldn't say certain words, right? And so as soon as that was lifted, then we were able to really get back to work. And I think maybe that even caused a little more motivation to work harder, faster to get things in the books and really work towards more inclusive space.
Does anyone else have any questions for Tess?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. Thank you very much for that presentation. So this summer, my Peace Corps reunion rural development group, spanning probably 5 or 6 years, different groups, we had a Zoom reunion. And it was so impressive to see how many people were really working in various international careers and doing great things all over the country. It was awesome, really. And so I totally can relate to your experience, and of course Julie here and Ann West and others. So thank you so much. And I learned a few things today that I did not know that I'd like to pass on. We're having another reunion in Costa Rica. This is a real live one this summer. So
Oh, that's exceptional. That's exciting, Lori.
Okay, so it looks like we have a question. What are some of the most innovative projects that volunteers have come up with?
Good question, Michael. We can maybe, I'd say our volunteers here, they work really in within the schools. We have the Spanish literacy, which is the only Spanish literacy program in the world. Most other literacy programs focus on English. And so here we do Spanish since it's the primary language. And then we have the youth and development program, which kind of hits those middle school age kids that need to think about their life skills, need to think about sexual and reproductive health. And then the high school kids that are with our community economic development sector volunteers. And they're working on entrepreneurship or a resume, professional skills to have after school, like opportunities once they graduate, you know, not just thinking like, oh, I'm gonna be a taxi driver or I'm gonna stay at home, just giving them, opening their minds to different opportunities that are available. And so there, I think innovatively, some of their projects, in the past, we've had a competition for these high school kids to present their business plans. And so seeing some of them come up with the ideas of, I'm going to have a cell phone repair shop, or I'm going to have yogurt because my family has a dairy farm. It's been really impressive. And so for them to build on those initial business plans and then actually be able to see some of them come to fruition afterward.
Another question is about like the most difficult issues besides COVID that you've seen in your time in the Peace Corps.
Did you see the picture with all the mud, Michael? That was an experience. There's a lot of mud, but I think that's a good question. I think they're all individual. It's about expectations. I think when someone comes in, it's what they really have an open mind, and they can read Peace Corps blogs and they can talk to former volunteers, but everybody's service is going to be so individual that one difficult issue, you know, might be easy for someone else. I'd say a language is something that's challenging. We get people who are native Spanish speakers, but they're not Dominican Spanish speakers. So they come in and it's like, wait, you say that word this way, or that's what that means here. So that
Tess, I was just going to add to, as someone that recently, returned, I would say like diversity, inclusion, and equity has been an issue in the past as a whole, as an organization, but I feel like it seems like that has been changing. And it just kind of goes back to what Tess had said, is like people have this specific view of what is an American or what is a Peace Corps volunteer, and that is not representative of Americans. And so just like looking at that and really just educating people and making them aware of, you know, how diverse, you know, America is, but also even within their home countries, like recognizing that diversity and celebrating it.
And there, the helping volunteers mitigate it. And the states, you're oftentimes you can confront it head on, like, hey, I don't agree with that, but that's not always going to be the safest manner to react for them in a new country where they're going to be maybe not surrounded by people with similar mindsets, correct? And so it is helping them navigate or think ahead of like what they could encounter. Here, race is a very big issue with Dominicans and Haitians, right? And so a Black volunteer might be questioned more for passport or papers versus a white volunteer. And so helping them navigate those situations or helping them avoid them more so as well. Like we used to place a lot of volunteers along the border prior to the pandemic, but there'd always be a conversation with the volunteers of like, this is what you can expect. You can talk to other volunteers about their experiences and then help them make a decision whether or not they would feel comfortable in a community that would be closer to the border or not. And then Michael, I see your question about the countries that no longer have Peace Corps volunteers. Used to be part of the Peace Corps network. Of course, Ukraine is closed. It's an awful situation there. That used to be one of our biggest posts. I want to say hundreds of volunteers that serve there at a different time. Just recently, Myanmar as well. We had to close, unfortunately, just for tough situations, right? And then what other countries? Nicaragua as well. That was 2018 or so, maybe, that they closed, I think. So in this region, anyway, of the world. But
I had a graduate assistant who was a student at UNO who was a Peace Corps volunteer. And thanks to Ann West-Leclue, another returned Peace Corps volunteer, and Lori and others who really coached Abel DeGendo and encouraged him to become a Peace Corps volunteer. And then he was evacuated. He was in Senegal. He was evacuated and he came and actually lived with my family for a while during a transition period, and is now working for the U.S. State Department. So I'm really proud of him, going on and doing his dream job. So yeah, all good with some of those evacuated volunteers. I was so happy to see that picture of the two who had been evacuated from the DR and now going back, and the charge d'affaires swearing him in. And yeah, I know it's been a rough time, but thank you to you, Tess, and to all of the Peace Corps staff who have made this this time, bearable, and now trying to get back up to whatever normal is. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, we are. I mean, by the end of this year, I want to say they expect around 1,000 volunteers to be back in about 43 countries of the 60 we were previously in. And so we are really working as hard as possible to meet all those criteria and bring people back when they're safe, and people are prepared to receive the volunteers. The RPCV from Senegal, we might have one of his former Peace Corps volunteer mates here in country. Of those 11 volunteers that returned here, there were a few that were volunteers that were evacuated from other countries, from Senegal, from Indonesia, from Timor-Leste. And so it's been really cool to see their dedication and commitment. Of those 11, like they've been waiting 2 years to come and serve. And so it's a whole new level of dedication and commitment on their behalf.
So I think we have time for one more question, and that's from Anne, who's also an RPCV. She's asking about in recruitment efforts, just thinking about diversity, how has the Peace Corps worked to recruit a more diverse volunteer population?
Sure. Well, volunteers at headquarters. The headquarters, we're working on more having a mentorship program, so people come into the office, and also just diversifying that senior staff group of, you are more inclined to see yourself go up that career ladder if you see someone who looks like you, if you can identify with someone who's above you. And so on that aspect, we're looking at the mentoring and then reaching out to more historically Black universities as well. More marginalized populations. We've had a lot of volunteers who've come from, they might be first generation US citizens, say their parents are from another country. And so connecting with them as well to better understand what support they need to come to service. Another thing is the increase in the amount that we reimburse volunteers for the medical procedures and all the tests, et cetera, the appointments that are required for one to serve. Like that was a big barrier. We used to only say reimburse $250 or $500 when that can be one medical appointment, right? So by increasing that, it's lessening the financial burden that one has in order to come serve. Also, I think they're looking at ways to, AmeriCorps does this with education loans, right? I was an AmeriCorps volunteer before going to Peace Corps, and so I wanted to finish that service to get, I think it was $3,000 at the time to pay back my education loan. And so Peace Corps is looking at doing that as well. Right, Julie.
Hear me?
Yeah, I can now, Ann.
Okay. Just wondering, are any HBCUs that are have Peace program, Peace Corps prep program on their campus? Do you know?
I'd have to look on that list. I don't offhand know. I really just went on and looked at ones in Nebraska that were available. But if you go to the peacecorps.gov website, you can see that the Peace Corps prep programs. So that's a great question. Yes. But well, I unfortunately am gonna have to go to a meeting here. We're gonna figure out which sites our new volunteers are gonna go to. It's really been a pleasure. I thank you, Julie, Patrick, and Lori, Vicky, Michael, Kinshiro. Like it's been a pleasure to talk about what I'm passionate about and share it. So thank you so much.
That was great, Tess. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck to you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to
Is there
see you.
Ian?
Thank you.